Hello and welcome to DDOCast episode 629, recorded live on Saturday, February 20th. I'm your host, Patrick. With me this week, we have returning to the show, Arkat. Try that again with me unmuting you on my end.
Oh, okay.
Hello. How's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. This week's screenshot: Ying, Snow, Gunga, Dom, Gisty, and Speedy complete R10 Curse of Strahd this week. In the screenshot of the week, that's folks from our guild. Nicely done. Great
Yeah,
screenshot
that's probably
as well.
one. Yeah, it's a great screenshot. Probably one of the better ones I've seen recently.
The screenshot or the quest completion?
No, the screenshot.
Yeah.
Screenshot.
I have been encouraging them for a while to actually send in some of their screenshots. Because usually when they complete some sort of challenge raid, they take a bunch of screenshots, and some of them are really good.
This one in particular.
Yeah. So well done. Great photography as well, which is fantastic. We like to talk about Dungeons & Dragons online nearly every weekend. You can catch us through Twitch, YouTube, the DDO forums, iTunes, or from our website at DDOcast.com. DDOcast is hosted by CyberEars, the awesome podcast hosting network, and shows are usually available within a few days of recording. The next show will probably be next weekend. We'll put a little bit of an asterisk on that because that might not happen. We'll kind of play it by ear. There are rumors about getting a producer's letter next week. So if that happens, I'm going to try a lot harder to get a show in. If there's not a producer's letter, it will be less likely that there will be, far less likely that there will be a show.
Yeah, save it up for the following week.
Yeah, just because it's going to be, I've got a fair bit of stuff going on next week, which is fantastic. It's great looking at my calendar, and there's a bunch of stuff on it, including theater work. So
work, yes, yeah. Work's always good.
in the entertainment industry, that's a fun deal. But of course, that makes it a little bit more tricky to find a couple hours to record a show and do the editing and yada yada yada.
Yeah, real life gets in the way a lot of times.
If there is a producer's letter, we're going to try really hard to get a show in next week. If there's not a producer's letter, not going to try very hard to get a show in next week. It's probably what it's going to be.
Understandable.
Especially since, hey, on the back end of the show, we're going to do part 5 of our Building a Tank series, which is the last part, which means I don't have a topic recorded and in the can for next week either. Which kind of, again, contributes to the...
Sure. Yet more stuff you have to do.
Yeah. See if there's a producer's letter. There's our topic. It's great. Everything's
that'll take the entire show.
Yeah,
for sure.
Any case, you can stay updated on all that stuff by following us on social media. At DDOcast on Twitter is probably the better place, but there's also a Facebook page. And you can check out our calendar at DDOcast.com. Or you can just wait for stuff to drop in your podcast feed or your YouTube subscriptions or all that fun stuff. That all works as well. On the podcast this week, like I said, we've got part 5 of our Building a Tank will be on the back half. And before that, we're going to talk about some game news. So, game news for DDO. There was a little bit this week. A little bit of an update on the anniversary event. Because I know there was at least in kind of my own circles, there was a bit of confusion about what was going to be happening for the anniversary event.
Mm-hmm.
There was some kind of based on some of the stuff that they had been saying, or Cordovan and others, there was an impression that the anniversary event was going to be like brand new. And I got some clarification from Jerry, and he said that there will be a few minor. He thinks that there's a few minor changes to the anniversary event per usual, but nothing drastic. The main thing that's going to be changing is the reward list. They're going to add the old house cloaks. So this was the 13th anniversary, I believe.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, you got one cloak for each house every week.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we got all 13 cloaks for all the houses. which you'll see around a little bit. I kind of had mixed feelings about them. Just there was nothing wrong with them. It was just kind of a preference of look and stuff. They all have the house crests on the back. So and
Which tended to make them a little busy, and only a
does.
few of them really look good,
Yeah, I hear you on that. Although I would say my kind of taste of them was less the crest and more the base color of some of them,
Okay.
which are pretty. They're all pretty. And without the crest, there's like nothing to them, right? They're just a base
Right.
color with the crest, which is fine. But some of the base colors are, shall we say, garish and hard to pair with existing armors.
Well, I imagine you and Tosh and all these folks sort of talk about that sort of stuff all the time. So I
Only
understand.
on Kasplat.
Yeah.
And only because I have them and I'm trying to help promote the game and like, hey, look, here's some cosmetics you can have.
And to annoy me.
Not really.
Oh, come on.
I think Grubby's latched onto that part. Anyways.
Well, sure, absolutely. Somebody's latched onto it.
The old house cloaks will be available. So if you missed that in the past, you can earn them. And that's I like that, I think.
There's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah, one of my chief complaints about the gift from last year, which was the Sentient Dragon gem,
right?
Was this is Dungeons and Dragons? Are you telling me that the only time I'm going to be able to get a sentient gem of a dragon in Dungeons and Dragons is this this
the 14th
window?
anniversary event?
Yeah. Like, so I'm hopeful that this means that they'll add that into something else later as well. Because that's one that I would like to see. And as a side note, like I'm still kind of shocked that Feywild doesn't seem to have a sentient gem anywhere.
You would see like some sort of a fairy of some sort have a very high pitched squeaky type voice. Yeah, I can see that, like a pixie voice or something.
Yeah, I'm not
Yeah,
sure
I
what
can
it would
definitely
be,
see that.
but I'm just surprised there isn't one.
I guess maybe the voice actor has been busy.
I'm guessing that was kind of more of a stretch goal, and they just ran out of time and resources to make it happen. But I don't know. Also, with the other things they're adding here is they're going to add a cosmetic helm. I heard that might be a crown, as well. So that'll be possibly an option.
Like a crown, or like kind of like one of those fiery type crowns, like the wintry fiery ones.
I'm not sure. I heard secondhand crown, so
Okay.
not from what the actual point of source, but someone talking about it as being a crown. I assumed it is like the fiery, like halo-y kind of crown that.
All right. So then the question is, what color is it? And I'll bet it's green.
I would assume.
Yeah.
We've got blue, we've got purple, we've got the white, we've got red. And of the colors that you can get in Reaper Wings, what you can't get is a green one. So that would kind of be.
That seems the obvious choice.
Also, the sentient gem of the kobold is bright green, so loose tie-in.
Extremely.
Also, they have two gifts that we'll be giving out. Sounds like one of those is going to be cosmetic, and one of those is going to be more practical.
Yeah, I want to know what the practical one is.
Yeah, right.
You know what it is? You know what I hope it is, PJ? What I hope it is like another one of those deals like the spark of dreams, spark of memory, but it's a spark of, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, but it already comes with the extra 50,000 experience points already. It accompanies it, and you just pop it in your weapon or your wherever they're going to put it, and boom, you got another slot immediately. That would just be awesome.
I'm kind of hoping it's something along the lines of a choice of items, kind of a thing.
Like a Raiders reward box kind of thing?
Yeah, but maybe more ubiquitous. And I think Sentient XP would be a great add to that.
Sure.
A Spark would probably also be a good add. So So, but I like there being choices with that. Like if you're gonna give me something that I can quote use, a couple of options would be great, including an
Yeah,
option that is ubiquitous and pretty much anyone can use. Um,
that'd be
and I think
nice.
Sentient XP is a good one for that. All right, we're gonna jump into update 48, patch 4, preview 2. So this was on Lemania this week. We're really just we're gonna mostly cover the new stuff. But Arkat, since he wasn't here when we talked about it as well, might have a few things to say about other things. So starting with the main thread, and again, this is just kind of some of the new stuff. As is typical, I'm not gonna go through every single line, but in Paladin Knight of the Chalice, Blessed Purpose stacks will now be properly titled Blessed Purpose. It was being labeled Ascendancy. And the Champion of Good no longer gives an unlisted change from +3 to +5 to the amount of melee and range power for each of these Blessed Purpose stacks. It will instead only increase the maximum stack size to 25 as listed. So what is that? Losing 50 melee power or
You
50
lose
power?
50.
Yeah.
You lose 50 melee power.
Um,
Goes down from 125 to 75,
right. Which is still a lot.
which is still nice. Which 75 is still nice, but man, I've been hearing people in various Discord channels and so forth just saying how they're gonna just single weapon fight and they're gonna get all the hyped up speed and they're just gonna build up those stacks really quickly and have like all that extra melee power. And like, okay, I ain't gonna last very long. And sure enough,
Yeah. So they're gonna be fixing that. Uh, they're removing Conjure component from Renegade Mastermaker from the game. That's the one that just gives you the
1,000,
components.
yeah, 1,000 components for
I'm
your what do you call it? Your
admixtures.
yes, thank you.
I don't understand why they're removing this.
The only thing I can think of, PJ, is inventory clutter. I mean, I don't know.
What if I? But now I have to actually carry the
You have to
ingredients.
actually carry the things. I
Unless
hear
they
you.
remove, unless they just removed the ingredients from needing them in the first place.
That's possible, but
Um,
they didn't say that. But it's possible.
Yeah, I don't remember that being a thing, although it might have been hidden in all of the Alchemist stuff
Hmm.
when it came out. Because I don't think the Alchemist ones use them, but
Oh,
um,
okay.
could be wrong. I haven't really played Artificer much uh, in the last year, so I haven't paid too close attention to that. Warlock aura colors now change depending on your pact choice. Uh, and that's something Linabel had mentioned that he was
Yes.
working on a while back. And several Warlock visual effects being the wrong color has been fixed as well.
Yeah, I can tell you that the Fey Pact um, aura is now a whitish, a whitish color.
Kind of like the white wings and stuff.
Yes,
So you can color coordinate your Reaper wings and your crown with your aura,
with your aura, absolutely, and I'm sure there will people that will do that.
probably. Um, this may go down as one of my favorite release notes in a while. All raid runes, except for Shroud, can now be used by double-clicking them instead of needing to go to the quest giver NPC.
Yes, that's good.
Convenient.
There were people that were gushing over it on the forums, and I got to tell you, I wasn't gushing. I mean, it's fine. Where I guess really where it could really be helpful is for the Strahd runes.
Yep.
People have to run the raid in order to be able to turn in their Strahd runes. So yeah, I guess I'm happy about that.
Let's see. They resolved a minor cosmetic issue in the Barovia landscape.
What is hell? This is the second time I've seen a note similar, where they're fixing little things in the landscape, and it's not necessarily just Barovia, but it could also be in the new quest
Hmm.
where they or the new raid rather, where they say, oh, we're fixing some sort of visual issue. I mean, they're being really really mysterious there, and I'm just wondering what the heck are they talking about?
My guess is that it's a performance-based change. And I think the reason why it's mysterious is less that they're trying to hide what they're doing and more that they're trying not to be super technical about it. Do you remember? I think it was when Ravenloft came out. They mentioned something along the lines of if you're having performance issues, adjust this. I think it was
Yes.
like the filtering or something.
Yes.
There was some setting that they said turn this down because it's using this a lot.
Okay.
So I kind of figure it's kind of along those lines,
Okay.
but I'm not super sure.
Yeah.
But I assume that the coyness is less secrecy and more not putting out a bunch of technical jargon.
Okay.
They fixed some bad object filtering on Rally Cry, which is the Purple Dragon Knight and War Chanter ability, and the Purple Dragon Knight Aura and Favorite Soul Beacon of Hope and Wall of Healing that contributes to lag in certain situations, so some performance-based changes.
See, that's fine. I mean, that's a note that isn't particularly technical, but it's more specific than
Yeah.
a minor cosmetic issue has been resolved on the Barovia landscape. I mean, that's a good note. The previous one is not a good note.
Something else that might be going on here is those notes are actually probably written by two different people.
That could be.
Because I don't know if people realize sometimes that Cordovan is not the one who writes the notes. Right?
Oh no, definitely not.
Notes are given to him and others, and they figure out some of those notes they don't publish, usually around exploits,
Sure.
and stuff, so that might be what's going on there too.
Oh, speaking of Cordovan, I don't know if you've noticed. This might be the best place to mention this. In the if you go to the DDO forums and you open up Dev Tracker,
He's not in it. I did notice that
no,
yesterday, actually.
there's none of it. I went back to 2018. All of his stuff is. I mean, all the things he's ever posted are still there, but anything mentions in the Dev Tracker are all gone. It's weird.
I'm guessing there. If I were to guess, I would say that the likely thing there is that he can actually turn off which ones of his are in the dev tracker or not.
Yep.
And I wonder if maybe he was in a hurry and tried to deselect something and deselect.
And did them all.
You know how your email has like that box at the top
Yes.
that will select everything, and instead of hitting the one just under that, he hit that one.
Yeah. That seems likely.
So
That's funny though.
yeah, I did notice that. It was kind of weird. Let's see. Specifically, I noticed it because I went in to go find the Chronicle.
Yes,
he wasn't in there.
Yeah,
Like,
414.
hey, wait a minute.
Absolutely. That's how I noticed it.
Let's see. Moving on to the Dryad and the Demigod. They did a deco pass. They did a pass on animations and drama.
What's a deco pass? I'm not familiar with it. Oh, is that what it? Decorations?
I assume it's a visual thing.
Okay.
That was my understanding.
Yeah, see, this is a bad note. It should be a little bit more, a little more explanatory.
It's that's a note that I think is again coming from
one of the artists or something, probably.
Probably, but more what I was going for is it's internal speak.
Yeah.
Not external speak.
Right.
I like the pass on drama has been done. Which, considering that this is kind of in their minds a quote musical raid, like fashioned after a musical. I like that. Funny.
Okay.
There are now multiple solutions to the puzzles. Yay. Well, depending on how much you like puzzles. The objectives panel now displays what percentage of corruption Hawthorne is at, which I think is great. If you're going to have a fail mechanic, having something it's easy to find on how close you are to that fail mechanic, very nice.
Like in KT, yeah.
Yep, exactly. Note that this may not be updating when she heals corruption levels currently. So I guess it's going down, but it won't go up for whatever reason.
Okay.
That's kind of what I'm reading there. I don't know if that means if you go down to 50% and then you get her back up to 70%, if she drops down to 60, does it then tell you you're at 40%? Like I don't know, but there's a messaging system, a feedback system for players, which is great. It's a little buggy going the up direction. Various bosses and mini bosses have had their special attacks fleshed out. Great. I think there's like a giant chipmunk in there. I'm really kind of hoping that one of the special attacks is it like swallows you and puts you in its cheek. That would be hilarious. Come on, that would be funny.
See if they put Nibbles back, even if they brought Nibbles back and made him a giant Nibbles back in the there, in the Feywild, that would be pretty cool.
Let's see some other stuff. Oh, actually, this may be my favorite. A pile of minor work. That's it.
Perfect. That just seems like the perfect SSG release note. We did some work. Okay.
Yeah, we did a pile of minor work. They also did some enemy stat balancing. So
now it says enemy stating balancing, not stat, but stating, or is that statting?
I guess it could be either or.
Enemies could be in a. I was thinking it could be statting, but I was thinking maybe it could also be stating, like an enemy, like maybe there are certain enemies that are in a dormant state, or in a particularly active state, at various points in the raid. So again, another crappy note.
I'm gonna go with based on the context stats, like statting, because they're balancing something. If you're balancing the monster stats, that would make more sense. But English language is a bitch.
You just needed to put the extra T in there, statting, STATTING. Wouldn't have been that hard.
Does statting have two T? Is statting even a word?
If you leave it the way that it's written, you can definitely interpret that as being pronounced stating. Just put in the extra T and make it,
or just
a little bit more
some
obvious
enemy stat balancing has occurred.
That would have been better.
Probably more grammatically correct too.
Yeah.
Anyway, the raid loot. So there were some changes to some of the raid loot. The longbow, Kopesh, and shuriken are all back in there. The shuriken is a work in progress. Those are, I think, the three that people were most excited about having.
Yes, I agree.
Actually, let me rephrase that. Most disappointed to have lost.
Yeah.
Also, the great axe is now a hand axe.
That'll be helpful for all those single weapon fighter types, like the bards and just swashbucklers and whatnot. Yeah.
And it should be noted that it is not the old hand axe. There was back when they previewed Feywild, there was a hand axe that, among other things, had like a headman chop when they were like it became Vorpal when they were under diplomacy. Or something like that. I wasn't ever clear how. When I first read that ability, I was pretty down on it. It's like, so it's a Vorpal weapon, but only when I've used diplomacy.
Right.
Which
talk about backstabbing. Jeez.
Well, that's like, so in order to get the Vorpal effect, not the plus weapon damage, just the Vorpal effect, I have to use diplomacy. I have to have them affected by diplomacy. It's just felt like a less good version of Vorpal.
Yeah, and you better hit it. You better hit that Vorpal effect on the very first attack too.
Right. But this is they're just changing the great axe to a hand axe. I think that was. I feel like this is a good compromise. In that we're getting a hand axe, which people wanted a hand axe, and we're excited about getting a hand axe. I think it's a better hand axe than the one that they had before.
Oh yeah, by far.
And if I recall correctly from the list of raid loot, like there was like several two-handed fighting weapons. So taking one of those out and making it a hand axe, I feel like this is a solid win all the way around.
I agree.
There's a question in the chat from Delvin Nest. Can diplomacy get stacks? No, diplomacy doesn't stack, but there are abilities that stack based on diplomacy. Specifically, there's one in the Inquisitive tree, at least one in the Inquisitive tree that works that way. They also have you just use diplomacy regularly without having to do anything in there as well, so it works pretty well. Hirschum's Fiddle is now a minor artifact, which to me makes a hell of a lot of sense, actually. Like,
sure.
Hirschum's Fiddle being an artifact, a minor artifact, seems appropriate.
Yeah, isn't here some sort of a demigod or something?
Yeah, he's the demigod of the whole Feywild.
I would think, a demigod would have an artifact of some sort. So this is perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I'm not. I don't think we actually do. We have an orb that's an artifact before this? I don't think we do.
So. I don't think so.
So that could be kind of fun.
Sure.
Let's see. And then you noted that superior heroism was nerfed to +5 from +6. Did we ever actually have superior heroism before this?
No. What we did have on the first go round of Lamania, the superior. It was called super heroism at that time.
Sure.
But it was +6. So so heroism is +2. Greater heroism is +4, and super or superior heroism went to +6. Well, and then they did a little hidden nerf and knocked it back to 5. The only way that you could see this is if you actually got the item or looked at it, inspected it very carefully on the loot guy on Lamania, and happened to notice that superior heroism is now +5 instead of +6.
It actually says +5.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
My next question was going to be: is the change from +6 to +5 intentional or not? I think I'm kind of okay with it.
It's a verisimilitude of keeping it 2, 4, and 6 is really super important for obsessive compulsive people like me. So I really, I mean, it's going to really bother me. I hate. Yeah, it's really going to bother me if you make it +5. Just knock it back up to +6 and help my mental state out, please.
Given where things are these days, helping our mental state is a good and worthy cause.
I know, right? Yeah. Yes, please.
Yeah, I wonder if there's a concern about exploding. I assume the issue here would be skills more than saves or attack. But I don't know. Balance changes with spells. So the Epic Eldritch Blast feat is now +2d6 blast dice, +1 per 2 epic levels. So that's +7d6 dice at level 30. Which feels like about where I don't actually remember, but isn't that kind of about where it was?
No, actually, the Epic Eldritch Blast feat gave you up to 4d6.
This is more
of damage. So this is 3d6 more. That's correct. And the reason is this: because the next one, the Epic Arcane Eldritch Blast feat, used to give you another 3d6. So you basically still have the same amount of extra dice in epic levels for the Warlock, but the Epic Arcane Eldritch Blast feat now gives you Epic Pact dice instead of your Arcane Blast dice. So the change to these two feats result actually in +60 for overall results in +60 for packed dice damage, which makes sense because your packed dice damage didn't go up before with epic levels.
Yeah, I like how they're differentiating the two.
Yes,
I'm kind of laughing about how, like, I kind of ranted about this last time. Like, balance is a game of whack-a-mole. It's hitting a moving target that never stops moving.
That's right. It's always moving.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Which really just kind of reinforces my point that do it more often. Meteor Swarm is no longer penalized by the Fire Sork Savant. We talked, but they mentioned they were going to have that happen. Also mentioned in their
Can you, hey, PJ, can we just talk about that just real quick?
Sure.
It's not obvious why the Fire Sork Savant was actually nerfed, why that nerfed Meteor Swarm, and it's because Meteor Swarm has two components to it. It has a fire component and a physical damage part, which is actually defined as part of an as an earth spell type effect. So when you have a Fire Sork Savant, they they you have if you have that oh god, that state going, where you're the fire elemental, it actually takes 3 dice away from
Right.
all your earth spells. So while it helps the fire portion of Meteor Swarm, it also hurt the bludgeoning damage, the earth part of the spell.
My understanding was that the caster level thing was just hitting the spell across the board for both elements.
Oh, that's possible. That's possible. I just assumed that it was just hurting the earth part.
So there are now 5 new alchemist spells. The concentrated vial spells, levels 2 and 3. I haven't seen them, but I'm guessing there's one at level 2 for venom, and level 3 it's for each of the elements. They do 1d6 damage plus 1 per cast level every 2 seconds and can stack 3 times for 16 seconds. So pretty similar to other such spells, other than the fact that they are a much lower level. The sorcerer ones are level 5. So that's kind of interesting. I feel like I'm a little pessimistic that this is going to really alleviate the problems with like bigger boss fights and raid bosses. But I'm hopeful. Just never really been super high on the stacking dot spells.
Right. They're only useful on things with bunches, with bags of hit points, really.
Not even just that. It's just the like the sorcerer ones don't really tend to do super well in epics because you can't raise their cash level of them, right? I think it's kind of probably what's going on there. This is more a feel than numbers thing.
Got it.
Also, in terms of playing a sorcerer, I don't like. I have a sorcerer, and I pull him out every once in a while, but he's been not an electric or cold spec sorcerer for a long time. So those, like, I have those damage spells, but they're not my primary element. They haven't been my primary element for, I don't know, ages.
Right.
Probably 6-7 years.
Yeah.
So Arcane Pulse I think does okay, but that's only level 29. It's a level 29 spell, so that's kind of higher up there. Maybe I might try taking that on an alchemist, but I'm not super positive on that either because it's force damage, and as an alchemist, I'm not getting a lot of force boost. Right?
Now you gotta buy a lot of. Now you have to add the force thing. You have to get that stupid staff from Strahd. That has all that force spell power. Yeah.
And then I'm switching between that and fire stuff. Yeah. I like where they're going. I feel like the place that Alchemist is still missing is I would really like a single target spell at level 6. For use in those kind of in those boss fight situations.
Like a not a dot, but an actual damaging, blow 'em up spell.
It could be a dot. I think I would kind of prefer it to be more like a rune or a greater rune kind of a thing, like a single target high damage.
Okay.
Something to that effect.
Got it.
But I just feel like something at level 6. 6 isn't a great level of spells for a DPS casting alchemist to begin with. And it's single target boss fight stuff that's where DPS casters have always had a problem for me. So
Sure.
they fixed some bugs. I don't really feel like we need to go through any of those. Balance changes in combat styles. They really the only changes here were bug fixes that were only on Lomania. But you wanted to talk a little bit about offhand versatility and perfect single weapon fighting.
Right. So if you so my contention is going to be, and it's not just my contention. There are other people on the forums that are saying the same thing. Basically, that single weapon fighting is going to be the new meta, and it's going to be a combination, and it's going to be the same. It's going to be that way for melee, mostly because of offhand versatility and the change to perfect single weapon fighting. So, what offhand versatility allows for a single weapon fighter is if you've had nothing in your offhand, so no small shield, no rune arm, no orb, no
Nothing.
nothing. You can't have anything in your offhand. It will allow you to, and you take this offhand versatility feat. It's a feat. It's completely independent feat from all other lines. Like the single weapon fighting line, for example.
You do have to
It's
take single weapon fighting. Just the first level.
okay. Well, that's new. That's new. That's news to me. But okay. But if you only have to take even if you have to take that one, it's still not a. It's still worth it. Anyway, so what it allows you to do, it allows you to add 25% of your damage stat. So if you have, I don't know, it's a plus 40. Let's say you have a 90 dex, right? So that's a plus 40 to damage. If you have dex to damage, so it allows you to do another
45?
an additional. Yeah, 90 is a plus 40
40, yeah.
damage. Yeah. So if you have a 90 dex and which gives you plus 40 to whatever it is your rapier, for example. If you have dex to damage and from something, uh, this will add another 10. So 25% of 40 is 10. So that's an extra 10 points of damage. The perfect single weapon fighting feat will do that again. It'll not only will it give you plus 10 more melee power, but it also gives you another 25% of your main damage stat. So if you have both of these feats, you'll get a 90 dex, you'll have an additional 20 points of damage plus 10% melee power. Now that's pretty damn strong
Mm-hmm.
for a single weapon fighting tune. And don't worry about you throwers out there. Offhand versatility will work for you too, as long as you have nothing in your hand, in your offhand. You'll be able to add that extra. If you have a 90 dex, you'll add that extra 10 points of damage to your throwing damage. And if you have dashing scoundrel from swashbuckler, the bard swashbuckler, that'll add another 6 points of damage. So you'll have an extra 16 points of damage on throwers. And throwers are pretty strong right now, even though they nerfed the double shot. Um, Throwers are still pretty strong. Now this is going to make them even stronger. So, you'll see a lot of people now running around, whether they're throwers or meleeers, without anything in their offhand, and doing a boatload of damage. And I just feel like that this is another one of these things where SSG will have to nerf it, 4 to 6 months down the road, because I guarantee you're going to see a lot of single weapon fighter and throwers out there because of these
Do you
changes.
feel like you see very many single weapon fire or throwers with nothing in their offhand right now?
There aren't, in general, no, but in our guild, there are a couple of folks who are taking advantage of dashing scoundrel, and with their throwers, and they don't have anything in their offhand.
Right.
So this is only going to help. This is only going to help them, and it's going to make melee single weapon fighting with nothing in their offhand extremely viable.
So
That's putting it nicely.
I think I'm less concerned about the offhand versatility feat, just because it's for a feat you're only getting 25% of your ability score modifier, assuming you have nothing in your offhand. I feel like the cost there is okay. So I'm less concerned about that one. The perfect single weapon fighting seems like it's giving a lot now.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Because it already doesn't it like already give you. I'm trying to look this one up.
It gives you an extra range for vorpaling. So
Yeah.
if you rolled a 19, so if you have a it's like say you have the stagger shockers, gauntlets, and if you vorpal, if you roll a 20, you'll get this big giant blast of lightning and sonic going on. So if
Uh-huh.
you're at perfect single weapon fighting, you could roll a 19 or 20 and get the big giant blast of lightning
Woo.
and sonic going. So that's already a really nice thing of
Yep.
perfect single weapon fighting. These are going to add to it.
Um, I think in terms of they're setting themselves up, or they've set themselves up for a really strange thing here, in that they're really trying to make two weapon fighting kind of this more fight a bunch of things niche, which
I
in
mean, area of effect
yeah,
type thing.
you're able to hit more than one guy at the same time,
Right.
which I like. Other than the fact that there's this odd thing that kind of happens in that for normal gameplay that works really well. When you start talking about a raid and big bosses, that's less helpful because you're usually only fighting one thing at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, not always, but you're mainly focusing on like one big bad.
Right. The boss.
Which makes two-handed fighting less useful than single weapon fighting or two weapon fighting.
Yep.
And I'm not I like the concept. I'm just not sure how to handle like the balance gets really skewed there for what you're doing. And what you're playing. So that becomes kind of interesting. Yeah, like I think you're raising good points. Like, is this going to be too much? Which kind of for me just kind of dovetails right back into, okay, I'm okay with this, but like I really want to see, and I think SSG really needs to put more of a focus on balance as a constant thing, not a we're going to check in with this every year or so.
Right.
Kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Like the balance changes they're making, I really want to see, like in 2 months after release, either we're really happy with where they are and here's why, or we're gonna make another change and we're gonna make another tweak, right? And if you're doing that, when you're talking about, if you think about it like a pendulum, right? Like if you just keep swinging to the two extremes, like hopefully you're kind of swinging more towards the middle until you find that happy place, until something else pushes it, and again, it's a constantly moving target.
Yep.
But like I would like them to react a little bit faster, or a bit faster, and that kind of thing. So
PJ, and I've been thinking about that, and I think that makes a lot of sense. But I don't think somebody like Steel Star, a dev like Steel Star, um, he may not be able to actually be able to do that because he is constantly they are constantly
Mhm.
busy with doing things, for the next update. I don't know that he has time to actually sit down and look at, balancing things,
And I
you
would
would
say to
think
that, if
maybe.
one dev is responsible for balancing the game, there's a problem there.
Well, yeah, exactly. So my point is, I don't know that they have the QA staff to do that testing throughout, even after the update's been put out. I just don't know. I mean, you can have a QA staff to test things before it's put out, and just just by I guess just by, I don't want to say definition, but just by virtue of what they're doing, they're always putting up new stuff. They're
Yep.
not really paying attention to the old stuff in addition to putting out the new stuff. So it really just seems to me that they need another, I don't know, maybe two or three folks out there that are constantly playing with the old stuff and making balanced suggestion changes instead of paying attention to anecdotal stories on the DDO forums, which is mostly what's there.
Yeah, no, that's true. Like, I don't necessarily want to say how to solve the problem because I think there's a lot of different ways you could solve the problem, but
Sure.
the I think their development cycle needs to incorporate more work and of balance changes. And when I say that too, like what I'm not trying to say is look at like they're doing a lot of balance work on this update. I'm not
Yes.
looking for them to do that every 2 months. What I'm saying is this would work better and would come across better, and I think players would be more accepting of it if it was if that amount of work happened over the span of the last year since Alchemist came out.
Right.
If Alchemist came out and 2 months after Alchemist came out, they said, okay, we're changing the dice to multi-vial. And then 2 months after that, we're changing the cooldown time on multi-vial.
Right.
And 2 months after that, it was, okay, we're going to change caster levels, balance and
Right.
mix on here, and add these other spells, right? Like, if that's happening over the course of that time, if you spread that work out,
It's much more palatable.
it's
I
much more
absolutely
palatable.
agree. Yeah.
And it shows a commitment to maintaining balance as
Mhm.
opposed to these big pendulum swings every year.
Absolutely.
So,
100% agree.
um, last thing I'll say on this offhand versus single weapon fighting, I don't know how to value not having something in your offhand. That is a really challenging thing, I think. Delvin S in the chat was asking, does your defense get penalized with having nothing in your offhand? Possibly, depending on what you
Well,
had
sure.
in your offhand.
Yeah, if you had a small, for example, my thrower, Onanda, my thrower has the small shield. I forget the name of it, but there's obviously a defense,
Right.
shield defense benefit there, but it's very minor, extremely minor. But the big thing is the reason why I use that shield is it's got plus 50 MRR.
Right.
So if I lose that shield, I lose 50 MRR, and I'm in light armor, so my max MRR is 100. So if I get that knocked down to 50 now because I don't have that shield, that's a heck of a that's a very annoying loss of MRR. But I can always make up for that by maybe
Sure.
changing something about my slave lords, or one of my slave lords items, and make that sheltering get 45 of it back. So, it's helpful right now, but if I lost it because I wanted to do, offhand versatility and perfect single weapon fighting, or rather dashing scoundrel, um, I could certainly overcome the loss of the benefits of the shield fairly easily.
I think the distinction here I would make is that does your defense get penalized? Well, it could. I think it's more helpful to think about it in terms of loss of a gear slot. You don't have something there because, in the case of your thrower, you're not wearing a shield because you expect to use it to block things from hitting you. Like, your defense here is not get hit,
No,
not raise my AC by whatever a shield is giving me.
right.
And you're using that shield more as a, hey, here's 50 MRR. That's really helpful for me. So I think it's more of you're losing a gear slot. And
Yes.
because what you can do with that gear slot is so varied, like there's a lot of things you can do with a gear slot, especially in that offhand spot. So,
Yeah. Now with the chemical crafting, there's a lot of things you can use there.
the alchemical crafting, draconic vigor. Wait, is that the right? No, revitalization. That's
I
the
don't
one
know.
that gives you action boosts back in Thunderholm. Uh,
Yeah. Dracon. Yeah.
yeah, that's a really popular offhand thing.
Sure.
Shroud weapons is a really popular offhand thing. So there's, I think there's there,
Draconic reinvigoration.
Yeah, I think there's you're raising some great points, and others are raising some great points. Is this going to push this higher? Yes. Is it going to push it too high? My answer to that is maybe, and the biggest hang up I have is what is the value of that extra gear slot? And I don't know. I don't know how to even begin to calculate the value of that. So, let's move on to the last one. Is the balance changes with enhancements and miscellaneous. And the changes here is for Arcano Tech, the lightning motes and shocking vulnerability is now 1 action point per rank, and shadow dodge and quick strikes are also now 1 action point per rank.
That's for the monk. Is that for? Oh, is that the rogue?
I don't remember.
Shadow guy.
Thief
Or rather
Acrobat.
staff.
Thief
Thief
Acrobat.
Acrobat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's fine. I don't
Yeah.
think there's any
Sure.
major there. Okay. Bonus days, 25% Guild Renown boost through February 21st. You can also store more loot this week for the store sales. 20% off of character bank space, shared bank, deposit box, and plat storage, inventory space, bags through February 25th. Quick buyer beware on bags. Most of the big ones are bound to character.
Yep.
Sadly.
So buy it on the character you want.
Yeah.
You want it.
It's always a place of personal annoyance for me.
Yeah.
But that's all on sale through February 25th. You can also get a lesser
Well,
Guild Renown
why they
elixir.
do that though, right? I mean, the bags. I mean, there's a
Sell
reason why
more.
they make the bags. Well, that's one of them. I mean, but there's also another reason why
Sell
binder
crafting
account
storage.
bags are well, that's another thing, but I'll just say it begins with an EX.
The coupon code is Lesser Guild Renown Elixir. Coupon code Get Guild XP through February 25th as well. That'll take us to community news. The 414th Chronicle. We got a shout out for our show last week talking about Preview 1 on Lomania. Dried Blood solos Fall of Truth in under 8 minutes. You can watch the video on YouTube. Another one of our guildies getting a shout out. Doing all sorts of really crazy stuff these days.
Yeah.
I think they're ready for a new raid.
I think so.
The comment, are magical boots more comfortable?
Okay, so I actually had to sit down and I thought about this before I posted. I got the wording just right, and I posted on the forums and I said, as long as they were made of halfling leather, of course. Now that can be interpreted more than one way, and that was on purpose.
Are you turning halflings into shoes?
See, that was the bad way, but there could be a specific leather that halflings are known for creating, and they're super comfortable because they're lazy little bastards.
I mean, my answer would be that magical items tend to fit the user, right? Like
Yes.
So I would think magical boots would be insanely comfortable.
Sure.
Like they would be like the most perfect fitting boots you've ever had.
Sure. And your answer to that would be yes.
Yeah.
Well, how boring is that? So I decided to come up with
It wasn't just a yes, it was
it was a very, very fancy yes.
the one question would be the soles, right? Like I don't think a magical shoe necessarily is going to have a fantastic sole. And that's really important. Especially depending on how much you're on your feet and what kind of ground you're on as well.
Sure.
DDO Players News got nothing in their podcast this week. DDO Stream, first stop to find DDO on Twitch. This week they are highlighting Doug gets a new time. DDO PL goes down in flames. Rock and Friends deal with the weather. On Twitch, they're highlighting Newbie Cobra gets from 1 to 20 in 10 hours.
Did he do that? Was that 10 straight hours, and did he stream the entire time?
My understanding from catching a brief conversation was that it was 10 real-time hours, but from a like I think it was like stepping into the first quest and stepping out of the last quest, not
Okay.
like pulling all stuff out. Like there might have been some like I think there was like some prep work in terms of like cache and stuff like that.
Got it.
I do not know if he did it all in one sitting. He is trying to get it down to 6 hours, which is really fast.
That's insane.
That's pretty fast. And I actually compared his pathing to my pathing, and it's actually really similar, which tells me that I need to. I'm doing some of these quests way too long. So, anyways, Tom Kapoor gets critical, and Justalicious has a DDO day. And on YouTube, Samus Grobo TRs into an alchemist. Axel gets you ready for the next game update, and Symbiont solos killing time. That's actually decently impressive.
That is impressive.
Because there's
you need to finish those side rooms really quickly.
Yeah, the finishing the side rooms is the trick, is the sticking point, I think. And not just like, let's not even start to begin to think about the Tower of Despair part and how you're going to deal with the shadows and the boss at the same time. That's a little trickier.
Right.
Mickey also was thinking about endgame and playstyle in a new blog post. Let's see. Cordovan got overruled by a kobold in the latest weekly Wednesday lunchtime live stream, if you'd like to check that out. And they're also highlighting players' news. They interviewed Bill Champagne and Artemis, who were involved in the new raid and composing music and stuff like that.
Yeah.
There you go. Don't forget to check out D&D Night on DDO Stream, Sundays at 7 p.m. Eastern on twitch.tv/DDO Stream. That's our tabletop pen and paper series using Fantasy Grounds, our sponsor. And check out DDOCast. I am going to be out for a couple weeks. There may or may not be a show, depending on if any of the other people stream while they get together without me. But that's usually Wednesdays, 5:30 p.m. Pacific time, and that's going to be a lot less reliable and common going forward. Just because, we're having a baseball season almost probably this year.
Good.
So yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. Kids playing baseball is a passion and a joy of mine, so I'm looking forward to getting that happening again. And once games start, they're probably not going to be due to Splat for a little bit during the season, which is normal for us. So, but hey, we'll be playing as time and circumstances allow. That's kind of what we're going for here. We'll get into a little bit of Lightning Post. Dusk of Dread wrote in on our last episode, and he was looking at some of this stuff. He said the issue of taking the weapon item gear piece with the highest damage stat is because of the proliferation of expansion-based named items and sets entrenched in the game. At this point, very few people care situationally switch outs because they simply don't feel necessary. The DR system has been badly outscaled as it's still flat. DR needs to be almost prohibitive to try to fight that mob with anything that can't get through the DR, which is how it was in old DDO. Yeah, I don't know if it needs to be like completely prohibitive, and I'm not entirely sure that it isn't prohibitive enough in some places, but I do agree that the DR system in general just needs a good solid pass.
I don't know. The DR system has been that way since version 3 of Dungeons and Dragons, and I'm fine with having to penetrate cold iron plus good DR and
Yes.
piercing DR and all that stuff.
I'm talking about the numbers. Sorry.
I see. So
I'm talking about the
numbers should be higher.
We have a system that is based on pen and paper, and the numbering for DR is outside of Barbarian DR based on a pen and paper
Yes.
scaling, which
Yes.
isn't just a numbers problem, but it's a frequency problem, right?
What do you mean?
We attack faster.
True.
So you
So
think
the numbers are too low. So
when you
DR 10 / whatever.
when you think about like the pacing of pen and paper, right? Like
Yeah.
you get if you have a group of 6
Sure.
in a combat, you get maybe 2 turns in an hour if your group's really fast, right?
Hmm.
Which means you get to swing your weapon, 3 or 4 times in an hour, depending on the edition and how many swings you get and stuff like that. So something like a Vorpal, like when you get a Vorpal in pen and paper, it's this big deal, right? Like heck,
Yeah,
when you
absolutely.
get a 20 in pen and paper, it's a big deal because you just don't roll as much, right?
Right.
Whereas in DDO, it's real time. You're getting, I mean,
A load of swings.
yeah, like how many swings you get in a minute? A lot.
Right. And you can Vorpal like 3 or 4 times in a minute.
Easily.
Yeah.
Easily. I mean, if you swing once a second, just once a second, you're gonna get 3 20s in a minute. So like there's the time scaling's a little whack there, and then it's just because of that you balloon out hit points and damage, right?
Sure.
If an attack is doing 1,000 points of damage, DR5 is laughably meaningless.
Absolutely. Agree.
Right? That's where the problem lies.
Well, but hasn't that been resolved? Don't they give the monsters PRR now? So, isn't it?
So I would say, in terms of balance, to an extent, yes. In terms of value, what Dusk of Dread is getting at, in terms of valuing DR breaking, no.
I see.
Because the PRRs are whether I'm using the right weapon or not.
Right.
And I think now monster DR, like they have monsters that have a lot higher DR on different things, right? Like it works better in that system. But because they're giving it these large numbers, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think Dusk of Dread is right. Like in a lot of most of the time, like I still carry a golf bag of different weapons, but most of the time it's like switching weapons isn't necessarily giving me a whole lot. Now, I think I see this a lot more damage coming in than damage going out. But
sure.
There have definitely been times where like, oh, this thing has damage reduction. Let me switch to the best weapon I have that bypasses that damage reduction. Oh, I'm doing about the same amount of damage, so what was the point in switching?
Right. No, that makes sense.
So it's that I think that this is a really good point there. The other comment here was as a game-long 2-weapon fighting player. Here's a good bit of community about the sentiment about being shared by the devs that 2-weapon fighting is in a good place. Dusk says, I would say I'm not sure about that. If someone else in a very similarly geared developed character but using 2-handed fighting can do 80 to 110% of 2-weapon fighting damage, but apply it to 3 to 4 targets at all times, their damage is multiplicative. Yes, that's true, but I think there's a weird thing there of kind of going back to our earlier conversation of when do you value, like what are you doing, right? The 2-handed fighting person is going to completely lose the benefits of that when they're fighting one big bad, whereas 2-weapon fighting doesn't lose that problem. So,
right,
it's a very tricky thing. I mean, there's some people in our guild that I mean, they're always trying different things, but I think at least with one prominent person, the consensus is that the king of melee DPS is 2-weapon fighting. But that's also from a perspective of someone who does a lot of raiding and is trying to beat down a single target in a fast amount of time. So
yeah, you're talking about Jen, right?
Yeah.
And I would agree. He's always a 2-weapon fighting guy. So yeah.
Arnak writes in, if they says, okay, if they just flat out nerfed Alchemist damage, that would be one thing. But they're nerfing the feat, the item, and the cooldown. Now I have to change the feat, change the gear, change the flow of gameplay, and that's so annoying. Yeah, that's.
It goes back right to what you were saying. Unless if they had just changed one at a time over a period of months, it'd be a little. It wouldn't be so. This guy wouldn't be so miffed. I don't think.
A lot of people would be, and it would be easier to course correct, right, and see how
Yes.
it's. Because what's going to happen now is, Alchemist got nerfed too much. Well, where do we change? Like, which one of those things was the straw that broke the camel's back?
Yeah, what's the tipping point there? Yeah.
Right. We're gonna close out the show. Anything you want to plug, sir?
No, I never plug anything, so I don't stream. I don't do any of that stuff.
He does join us for DDOCast, though.
I do that. So,
Yep.
all right. So DDOCast, unfortunately, we're not going to be playing. So again, really nothing to plug.
It'll be back. It'll be back. Thanks for listening to the show. Thanks to Arkat for joining me this morning. I think we had a pretty good discussion.
Oh yeah. Always enjoy coming on.
And thanks to all the other contributors. Shout out to Epic, who's going to be on the Building a Tank part of the show. And to Standing Stone Games and Wizards of the Coast, and to Cyber's for hosting the podcast. If you'd like to support the show, you can visit our website at DDOCast.com, or you can support us on Patreon. If you have a DDO-themed webpage, or you Twitch DDO and you'd like to be featured on our website, you can email us at ddocast@gmail.com, and you can hit us up at ddocast.com for show notes, MP3s, or calendar, previous shows, and other fun stuff. If you have a comment on this episode, a question you'd like to hear us answer, a topic you'd like to hear us discuss, or you just want to say hi, leave a comment or email us at ddocast@gmail.com. You can also find us on social media and follow us for latest cast updates at DDOCast on Twitter is the best place. So stay tuned for part 5 of our Building a Tank series. All right, welcome back to part 5 of Building a Tank. The hopefully last episode of the mainline Building a Tank. Welcome back to Epic.
Hey, it's good to be back.
Yeah, it's always fun to talk about this stuff, right? Enjoying ourselves.
Yeah, part 5. Wow, there's a lot to tanking, huh?
There is. Don't worry. Some behind the scenes looking forward. I am planning a Building a Tank caster version. So we'll talk more about you want to be a caster in a tank and kind of throw some of that in there. Because I think there's some, there's a little bit to talk about there in terms of there's some different gear choices and things that you have to consider and how to be an effective caster and a tank at the same time. Also, Voodoo Spice, one of our regular guests, is itching to get in on the conversation on that one, I know. So.
Oh yeah, is he still in his druid tank?
Yeah, druid tank there. I got some other people hoping to pull in. So, let's see. We've been talking a lot about tanks. Where are we going today? We're going to talk about a little bit about some skills to kind of think about and kind of pay attention to and hone. And we're going to talk about knowing your enemy and kind of planning for what you're going to face. And that's where we're going to start. Is kind of this idea of knowing your enemy and what you're going to face, because raids are not different, or not the same. They're very different. And I don't remember when we talked about you kind of brought up this idea of like, well, hey, give us the best tank to build, right? Well, we can't do that, right? We gave you some ideas of, maybe what's kind of a really great across the board tank, but there's going to be some places where it's going to be challenged and stuff. So that's what we want to kind of really get into today. And especially since, Epic, you've been a lot more involved in kind of the Lava Divers push attempts in things like KT and Lord of Blades and stuff. And so you can kind of maybe bring in some of the, well, how did you start developing these tanks and why?
Sure, and you're exactly right. It is all raids are not created equal, and that is very annoying because it leads to TRs and running giant hold to get more hit points, way more than I'd like to. But these raids, they bring different things to the table, and if you're wanting to push, what you can do and push skulls, you also have to bring different things to the table. So these builds that we can come up with sometimes might, I would never take anywhere else because they're built for one specific thing. I think the best way to do this might be to talk about some of the in-game raids and what I bring and why we choose to bring those certain things. So whether it's too hot and we're looking at elemental damage or
And evil.
Alignment damage. Evil damage is a big thing. And also 2-second deflect arrows, because you can deflect the flying skulls. That's really important in that raid. I think it's important in most things, but specifically in 2-hot, it's really useful to have 2-second deflect arrows. And not just for the tank, but for other members of your party as well. Also, you've got to consider aggro management. So if you're beating on a boss that's just standing still and you've got DPS behind you that is doing a lot of damage, are you going to be able to hold aggro or not? So that gets into, am I going to have to build a tank that's got to worry about to hit or doing damage? And that was an issue when we were doing like R6 or R7 KT. We had some heavy hitters back there that were pulling Cortázar off of the tank, so you had to build specifically to be able to hold that aggro. So whether you're talking about a paladin or a barbarian with 2,000 hit points, or whatever tank you have in mind, a bear tank, it is specific to the raid you're going into, and we can talk about that by talking about the raids, or however you want to do that, PJ.
Well, let's do this. There's no way that we can cover every situation, right? Because there's a lot of raids, there's a lot of quests that have different things in them, and depending on where you are, where our listeners are in terms of where they're trying to push. But let's give some specific examples, and maybe let's talk about the process of what that's like. Pushing. Okay, we tried R6 killing time and we failed, and here's where we failed. So how do we then kind of build to address that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I mean, enough about the raids themselves. If you want to pick the instances, or I'm more than happy to comment on.
Well, so we'll give some like really major examples here. Some extreme examples. Lord of Blades has there's almost no elemental damage that he's going to throw at you in that raid, right? Like it's all about physical damage from Lord of Blades. He's going to hit you like a truck. And he hits really often. We say he's very good at hitting, even heights. So that's where before Lord of Blades, I think we had a lot of tanks that really leaned into AC, PRR, MRR, right? And when you guys started running that, then that wasn't working, and he was hitting too hard. So it became, okay, well, my 500 AC, he's hitting all the time, so I need to survive more hits. So instead of going with 500 AC, we came up with this. I keep saying we. You guys came up with this idea of, okay, well, we're gonna go with a barbarian tank that has 250 AC, which functionally against Lord of Blades is the same as 500 AC. We can't get AC high enough to not get hit, so we're not going to worry about AC. We're going to lean into hit points and healing amplification.
Yeah, that's right, and it ties into a little bit, and I'll just say this. We talked about friends with benefits. Go listen to the last episode. Even talking about getting your tank to a position that can take that damage from the Lord of Blades, you've also got to worry about debuffs from your teammates, right? Making sure to decrease the damage that the Lord of Blades is doing. So all of that went into a discussion of how can we as tanks survive the Lord of Blades on R6, R7, and what eventually started out as 2 paladin tanks ended up being 3 tanks, with a lot more hit points, because it's a math game, right? You got to get to that point to where you can survive 2 or 3 hits. But in that same thing, Lord of Blades on the R10 KT, right? So I tanked that part of the raid, and the healers did a great job. I was able to take the damage on my barbarian. Like you said, I was taking all the hits. I could take 2 to 3 before I was dead. There was still, his major attack. It's where he swings his spear behind his head and then slams on the ground. I still couldn't take that hit. So even with all planning, there's things you have to do. Tumbling, for instance, the first time I went in there, I actually didn't have tumble, so that became the build for tumble, so I can make sure to get out of the way.
Yeah, I'm gonna throw out 2 asides. We didn't talk about debuffing with friends with benefits, and that was probably an oversight. I am planning on having a episode that we're gonna focus heavily on debuffing, why it's important, why it can be really useful, and how it can really elevate your game and your group play. So we'll set that aside just to say that debuffing, very helpful. And then tumble. Get 1 rank of tumble. You don't necessarily have to get a ton, but get at least 1 rank of tumble. Because if you have 1 rank, you can tumble. And when you start talking about a character that's at endgame, you're going to get your dexterity modifier to tumble. You get +1 to like all skills every time you get an epic level. If you have completionist, you're going to get +2 to your tumble as well. I think my tank has 1 point in tumble, and he can still do rolls with a tower shield and armor. So you don't need a lot of investment there, and it's really helpful.
Yeah, I agree. And determining, so tumble is universally good, but determining what type of tank, whether you're specifically focusing on a hit point threshold, or if you're Corkaza, there are things. So Corkaza is doing electric damage. You want to make sure you have electric absorption and
evil.
Yeah. So the evil thing, that's interesting because evil is a will save, right? So I make sure to have a high will save and a no fail will save at that, from a twist, from a Epic Destiny, from Magister, and as well as reflex. So there's things that you need to tailor to each raid and each situation, regardless of the tank that you're playing.
And then just to throw out another example, when we were pushing Baba's Hut a while ago, one of the things we kind of started running into was the horde wilting from the scarecrows. I can't remember if Baba throws it as well anymore.
I think so. I think it's just the red name scarecrows.
Yeah, but that became a consideration to have in kind of thinking about. And that raid also has, if you're not killing the mounds, you have to build around this idea that you're going to lose a percentage of hit points, so hit points again become really important. So those are kind of just some examples of specific ones. Maybe let's talk about the process a little bit, which I think you can expand on this, but the process I think is kind of boils down to, okay, go in and push, get killed. Okay, then why did I get killed, and how do I build around that?
That's exactly right. You go in, you fail, you ask, why did we fail? And then you consider, how do we not fail? Like, is there mechanics in the game that exist that allow us to get through this? And that isn't just something that one person does in our guild. It's many conversations and a lot of game knowledge and a lot of going back in and failing again and coming out. And I think KT took us months, and part of it was lag, but part of it was the raid's tough to do on Reaper 10, and it took many iterations of people, tanks and casters or whatever, rebuilding their characters for specific situations.
Unless we paint ourselves a too glossy of a picture, some of the, like, you have these conversations, right? And it's like, okay, we died. Why did we die? Okay, this is what we did. Okay, how are we gonna address that this time? Okay, I've got an idea. This is what we're gonna do. And then you go in, and then your result is, wow, that was worse. That was not an improvement. Yeah. Rethink.
And I emphasize it took us months to beat KT for a reason.
Yeah. So there's a lot of that kind of gaming going on, and then you do have to have this critical eye and things, and recognize that when you're making changes, you're probably giving something up, right?
So a perfect example of that is of both the failing, rebuilding, missing something else. Is still, when we're on the subject of KT, it's funny because while I was taking LOB in there, I thought the Lord of Blades had an intim check of like 133. Okay, it is not. It's like 135. So I was 2 intim points away from having an O-fail, and it happened more than once on R10 that I failed to intim check the Lord of Blades, and it's just, it's one of those things that you can try to catch everything, but and sometimes you do, but you rebuild and then you find out, hey, this one doesn't have as much as intim as my last tank did,
and that those 2 points are important.
Yes.
It's like spinning plates, right? Like you got to keep them all going, and if you focus too much on one, it crashes. And then like we've said it numerous times. Like other times it's, all right, well, this AC plate isn't helping me against Lord of Blades, so that one's going to crash, and we're going to focus more on these other ones. Sometimes those are choices you make. So,
yeah, that's exactly right.
So some specific things, other specific things that I want to kind of talk about is a couple things that you really want to focus on their special attacks, right? So some examples of this. You can watch our the Lava Divers Project Nemesis video of R10 Project Nemesis and learn why it's important to have deflect arrows to block Urk's special attack, which bypasses dodge. Not going to name names, but it's something to consider. One that's a little trickier that I want to throw out is knockdown immunity. There's a lot of raid bosses that just have special attacks that bypass knockdown immunity, but there are a couple that don't. And the one for me that's been a reminder of this recently is Master Artificer. Knockdown immunity works against the Titan's knockdown attacks, which is huge.
Yes, it's very useful. Corpus as well, I think, I heard knock you down, and knockdown immunity works there.
So those special attacks are things to think about, and kind of look for, as you're trying to figure out what do I need to build around, is look for those special attacks and special mechanics of the raid. Another example from Master Artificer would be, the Purple Titan has an anti-magic shield, which means that only level 8 and 9 spells are going to work in there, which means if you're going to push that raid, you should bring some people who can cast level 8 and 9 healing spells to keep the tank alive.
Yep.
Stuff
and
like
I
that.
think so. Mechanics of a raid are extremely important, no matter what raid you're running, and not just for the tank. Like you just said, healers need to know certain things. So everyone listening, whether you're running a tank or not, cannot tell you the reason raids fail, in my opinion, is normally not because the group is not strong enough to do it. It's because the mechanics either aren't known or weren't explained well enough. So there's a lot of things that can be avoided, mitigated, and just made a whole lot easier if people know what's going on.
And why it's going on too. There's a whole bunch of mechanics that people, they know what they need to do, but they don't necessarily understand why they need to do it. So there's, especially, I would just say, kind of as an aside, if you're teaching someone how to do a raid, don't just tell them what to do, but tell them why you do it as well.
Exactly. So whether it's, you're talking about Cortaz's lightning hitting people that aren't up under her, under certain times during the raid, that's an example of, I've seen a lot of people die by that just because they're not aware of that mechanic, or the Lord Blade spin attack and how tells that they give for what they're about to do.
I think this is going to dovetail really nicely into wanted to spend a little bit of time, necessarily a lot, but on some skills and some things you want to be aware of as a tank. And the one we're kind of focusing on now is special attacks and tells. And I personally have the opinion that you can build a great tank, but what makes someone really good at tanking is being able to recognize quickly and communicate quickly to the rest of the party the tells and special attacks that the bosses are doing.
So we don't always add our voice chat to our raids that we post and stuff, but the ones that we do, if you listen, there's people calling out stuff all the time. So even though we've ran this raid so much, regardless of the raid, even though everyone single-handedly probably can tell you all the mechanics, it is still vitally important that there's one person, either the tank or a healer that's watching, knows what's going on and can call out other people, hey, you need to, get out, or you need to do this to avoid, damage or whatever. It's vitally important for the tank to know those things.
And the reason why I often focus on the tank as that person is because the tank is probably the person. The tank is hopefully the person most focused on the boss, right? Like,
exactly.
That's their job, is this guy, right? The trash that's spawning over here, that's for the DPS to go and kill. But where it becomes important, like I've heard people say, well, everyone just needs to pay attention to the tail slap. Well, if my job is to go and kill this trash thing that's behind me, and now the tail is behind me and I can't see it, right? It's out of my field of view. Or if my job is the healer and I'm really focusing on this 2-inch by 2-inch portion of my screen of red bars going up and down and keeping those up, right? Like, there's a lot going on. You don't necessarily see it. Another one, like, just to throw this out there, like Project Nemesis and Vision Destruction have a mechanic that has a global curse effect. Well, if you're the tank, you can actually, like, the bosses actually have a tell. Like, they have a wind-up move to make that happen. And you can let people know it's coming, and that can be really relevant. It gives people more time to react to, I'm going to need to remove my curse in a second.
Yeah, I agree with you.
So that's something that if you want to up your tank game, like, learn special attacks, learn what that means and how to tell that they're coming, and be able to communicate those quickly. Like, there's a lot of, like you were saying earlier, like there's a lot of raids that fail simply because those mechanics don't get communicated in a timely and accurate manner.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and I think it's telling that this isn't always true, but for a lot of raid leaders, they tend to be the tank a lot of times because they do know the raid and they have to pay attention to it.
Yeah. And there's, like, I have a philosophy of leading raids, and sometimes I'm just as lazy as other people. But when I try to explain and the raid every time, right? Like, even, and you know this, like, when I run a raid, it can be all guild people, like, half of the group has completed this raid on R10, and, like, we all know what's going on. But I still give the same instructions, even if they're lazy. Like, I still give the same instructions so we're all on the same page, because some people do things differently, right? Or, so, especially if you're in a pug, like, I always, like, at least let people know the basics of what's going on. But,
yeah, do things differently, or just, get tired and lazy. A good example of this is, are too hot and having to use divine intervention, even though people know that that is an important part of their role. Every few minutes to do something, we had people falling asleep at the keyboard or just forgetting, and you have to, someone needs to be reminding people of what's going on.
Yep. And the benefit of that too is other people learn what's going on in the raid, and then they can teach. You can learn through that osmosis. At least they'll learn what they're doing. Maybe not why, but at least the what part.
Exactly.
Other things I want to talk about, situational awareness. That kind of dovetails in what we were talking about there. But, be aware of what's going on. Hey, I'm down to one healer out of 3. maybe I should spend some time kiting the boss if I can for a few minutes, right? Like, don't just stand there and get whacked.
So this is probably situational awareness is one of the biggest complaints I get from people about tanking. It's not that the tank doesn't have enough hit points or enough defenses or that they can't hold aggro. It's that they do something they should not have done. And that can get really difficult and really chaotic at times because there can be so much going on and you're just like, hey, I'm trying to keep this person on me so he doesn't kill other people. But that can, that can change really quickly. So you mentioned Lord of Blades, whether or not you have to kite, or if the dogs run up to you and you keep intimating while someone's trying to get the dogs off of you, that's your fault. Even though I realize that you're trying to keep the Lord of Blades from going to other people, you need to be aware of what's going around you. And that even ties back into knowing the mechanics. And if, there's about to be a huge cleave that's going to kill you, your team, you need to know how to move and where to move. And that involves you paying attention, knowing the mechanics like we talked about, but paying attention to what's going on so that you know how to respond and hopefully not, kill someone and have them sending you tales about why did you just do this?
I'll give another example. In Killing Time, the dragon has a couple different breath attacks. One's a straight shot and one's a sweep. Now, generally when I'm tanking, I don't tend to call those out because in most of the time that fight's happening, I'm the only one in the arc. But when trash spawns and there's trash in that front arc and there's a sweep coming, like that becomes much more important. Right? And that's when I need to remember to call it out because there's people that are in that danger area.
Yeah, and I'll use one of my mistakes instead of someone else's. In KT, when we were doing R10, okay, there was trash that spawned. And my job, if I wasn't taking the dragon at that time, or Bent wasn't taking the dragon, is to get as much aggro of the trash as you can. Well, generally, I would say I'm really good at knowing the range of intim, right? But at one point, I was intiming an Orthon, was too close to the dragon, which is a situational awareness issue, and I pulled the dragon, and I got, I think, 1 or 2 people killed. So it is important to know the range of your intim. How far can you be away before you pull something else? So those are really good things to know as a tank that come with time and when using and with tanking and using intim. But yeah, I agree that situational awareness to me is the number one thing that either gets people killed or a tank does something wrong.
Especially, we're talking a lot about Lord of Blades and Killing Time because those are some of the more challenging raids there. But they also both have a mechanic that almost necessitates switching out your tank, right? Killing Time, you get more vulnerable to electric damage. Lord of Blades, he's reducing your maximum hit points, and a communication and like, oh hey, you're down a third of your hit points. Let's switch tanks.
And that can get dangerous very quickly if you're not communicating with your tank, because like in Cortaza, we've had before, me or Benton try to run away and we still have aggro and the dragon flips and kills the party. So
the last thing, and I don't think this will be too long, but I want to talk a little bit about positioning. I think this is something that, again, tanks tend to kind of forget. Like, it's not just about you getting and maintaining aggro. That's important. You want to be taking the damage. You are protecting everyone else from taking damage. But you also need to give people a position to attack and do damage to that boss, right? And generally that means you need to expose the backside of a boss in a way that is safe for everyone else, right? So if you're tanking Lord of Blades, for example, if you go to the very edge and face the Lord of Blades so his back is in the liquid goo or whatever it is, that's not very helpful. No one can attack him safely.
Yeah, and I would also, with the Lord of Blades, you're right. So if the Lord of Blades is facing, his back is against the liquid goo, no one can attack him and do DPS. Likewise, if your back is facing the liquid goo and decides to use his whirlwind attack, you're likely going to be going for a swim. So, you got to be aware for the DPS and yourself where you should be standing. Korkaza, if you're jumping onto the island, turn the dragon away from everyone else so she doesn't breathe and kill everybody.
Yep, those are great examples. I like with the Titans in Master Artificer, I like to be kind of against a wall, so they can't push me way away. Vision of Destruction, it's really common for tanks to get in the little cubbies. What that does is it keeps Sulo facing the same direction. He can't turn on an axis and kind of change his cleave arc, which helps the melee get in there.
Yeah, and cleaving is an excellent thing to bring up as well, because if you're like the Orthons in Vision of Destruction, if you're far enough away from them, they're just going to shoot their bolts at you. Whereas if you're within range, they're going to cleave you, which makes it really difficult for melee DPS to get up there and do DPS if they're taking loads amounts of damage. And I know we're talking a lot about raids, but these things apply to individual quests as well. And the first thing that comes to my mind is like Grim and Barrett, the end boss with the light, the light burst
Divine
spell.
Wrath.
Yeah, like if you're intimidating that boss and you're standing by everybody else, you're going to get other people killed. So you need to be aware of AoE damage, cleave damage, where you should be standing to keep other people alive.
And I'll tie all of these things we're talking about together with Lord of Blades. And we keep going back to this because it's a very mechanic-heavy raid, and it's great examples of this. And we can't cover every example in the game. But how I like to position Lord of Blades, I like to be about halfway between a little less than halfway from the center to the outside, right? So I'm going to be a little closer to the center than I am to the outside. And I want Lord of Blades to be facing towards the center, and me towards the center. The reason why I like to tank there is because if he goes into a whirlwind attack and bats me, I have more room on the platform to land on. But I'm also I've positioned the rest of the party in the melee DPS close to the center, so if he does an attack where he does jump up special attack or his Rain of Blades special attack, they don't have to run as far to get to the safe spirit area in the center. Those are all things that you can tie all those things together, and that's a really good example, I think, of how to tie in that positioning, situational awareness, and special attacks.
I agree with you, and I think that if you're learning to tank, or you've been tanking for a while, not been paying attention to these things, and you want to improve your skill, that's mechanics and knowing where to position yourself to make the raid easier for DPS. That's one of the best things that you can do.
And ask questions. If you're in a raid and you're seeing someone else tank, hey, can I ask you first? Ask them if you can ask them questions. Wait till after the raid, probably. And then, most people will be happy to have a conversation, tell them why they do it. Some of that may be helpful. Some of it may actually be bad advice, and you'll have to parse that out. But, Epic and myself and Benton, if you can catch him, who helped with the first couple parts of this, we'd all be happy to pass on our knowledge if you give us a shout. So,
yeah, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions.
All right, that's going to wrap up our Building a Tank series. We'll come back to this a little bit and talk a little about building a caster tank a little bit in the future. But thanks, Epic, for joining me today and covering this. It's been a lot of fun.
Thanks, PJ.
Anything else you want to say on the way out here?
I don't think so. I think we, in 5 parts, most things should be covered, yeah.
Except for the one thing that we don't remember. But
right.
And hey, we've mentioned this the last couple times too. Lava Divers have some videos of these raids in a really higher difficulty level, and you can really kind of see and get some of those mechanics and kind of learn some of them. There's other people who have video raids out as well. Voodoo Spice has a teaching raid series that they do. They're probably actually doing it. They usually do it the first part of the year, so he's probably got them going now. But he's got a bunch of videos on his YouTube page. There's a bunch of other videos out there of people running raids. So you can kind of see what other people are doing and maybe get some different perspectives and stuff like that as well. If you'd like to support DDOCast, you can visit our website at DDOCast.com, or you can support us on Patreon. You can also find show notes, past shows, and more on our website. And you can find me on social media to follow us for the latest cast updates. At DDOCast on Twitter is the best place. If you'd like to join the discussion, leave a comment, email us, ddocast@gmail.com. If you have questions about specific questions about quests or raids that you'd like help figuring out, like how can I be a better tank in those situations, or you have some ideas that you'd like to share about building a tank and that stuff, let us know. We'd be happy to share that on the show in the future as well. So until next time, may all your attack rolls be crits, all your chest level appropriate, have fun, and don't forget to gather for bus.